You ever notice how some people decide who you are before you even speak? Like they've already written your story and all that's left is for you to play the part. Yeah, that happened to me once, and it started on a sun-baked stretch of highway where the air shimmered and the silence felt heavy enough to press against your chest. I was driving mine on autopilot cruise control set radio low, thinking about a meeting I didn't want to have but knew I had to, when the lights came on behind me, red and blue, flashing like a verdict already delivered. You know what I mean? That feeling where you haven't done anything wrong but your stomach still drops because experience has taught you how this can go. I pulled over calmly, hands visible, breath steady, telling myself to stay centered because panic never helps. The deputy took his time getting out of the cruiser, slow walk, sunglasses on hand near his belt like a prop he'd practiced with, and I could feel it even before he reached the window. That look, that judgment, that quiet satisfaction some people get when they think they've found an easy target. He tapped on the glass, not polite, not gentle, just hard enough to remind me who he thought was in charge. License and registration. No hello, no explanation, just power served cold. I asked if there was a problem and he leaned in too close, telling me he'd clocked me at 70 even though my speedometer still read 55. I said calmly that I didn't think that was right, and that was the moment his face changed. You can always see it, that little flicker when they realize you're not going to crumble the way they expected. He told me to step out of the vehicle, and I said I was happy to provide my ID but didn't consent to exiting the car for a speeding ticket. That's when the accusations started. Drugs, money, the kind of comments that are supposed to make you feel small, like you need to explain your existence. He raised his voice when I reached toward the console, even though I narrated every movement like I'd been trained to do, and suddenly it wasn't about traffic anymore, it was about control. He called for backup, labeled me non-compliant, and I knew that word carried weight because it gives permission for things to get ugly fast. Another cruiser arrived, gravel spraying, a younger deputy jumping out, eager, tense, looking to impress. The first deputy told his version loud enough for me to hear, painting me as a problem that needed solving. And before I could process it, they were pulling me out, my license hitting the dirt, my arm twisted harder than necessary, my face pressed against the hood that burned with heat. I remember focusing on my breathing, counting it in my head, because fear is exactly what people like that feed on. He leaned in close, whispered things that cameras don't pick up, things meant to humiliate, to remind you of your place, and his hands searched where they didn't need to, lingered where they shouldn't. Inside, something in me went very still. Not numb, just focused, because I knew something they didn't, and I knew if I let emotion take over, it would end badly. When he reached into my jacket and pulled out my wallet, I saw his confidence evaporate in real time. He expected plastic and pictures, not the badge that caught the sunlight and seemed to blind him for a second. The world went quiet, like someone had hit mute. He blinked, looked again, then at my face, and his voice cracked when he muttered that he didn't know. I straightened slowly as his grip loosened without him even realizing it, asked for my wallet back, and watched the second deputy's face go pale when he saw it too. That's when the backpedaling started, the awkward smile, the talk about being on the same side, like a switch had flipped and now we were suddenly equals. I stepped forward and he stepped back, and I told him exactly what he'd done, illegally detained. Me filed a false report, assaulted me, touched me. He dropped to his knees to pick up my license, wiped it on his pants like that erased anything, said no harm done, and that's when I pulled out my phone. Just a movement. Nothing dramatic, but it was enough to break him. He lunged for it, pure panic, and that was his last mistake. I moved without thinking, training taking over, trapping his arm, sweeping his leg, putting him on the ground hard, pinning him with a wrist lock that made him scream. The younger deputy froze, shaking, and I told him not to even think about it, to put his hands on his head, and he did, because suddenly the roles were very clear. Then came the sound that changes everything. The deep chop of rotor blades, the low rumble of engines, black SUVs rolling in like a tide, agents moving with purpose, weapons ready but controlled. The man pinned under my boot was crying now, actually crying, asking who I was, and I told him the truth, that I was the person he should have treated like a human being in the first place. At the station, the sheriff tried to contain it, tried to call it a misunderstanding, but there are moments when the story gets too big to bury. Records were seized, cameras taken, files pulled, and the cracks in their little system started to show. The search of his cruiser turned up cash, pills, burner phones, and suddenly it was clear this wasn't just about one bad stop. The younger deputy broke first, talked about a garage, a safe, a box of IDs kept like trophies, names of people who never made it home. When we raided the house and opened that safe, the weight of it hit me hard. Stacks of money, notebooks, and plastic cards that represented lives reduced to numbers. I recognized one name from an old missing persons case. And that was the moment it stopped being about me entirely. This wasn't corruption, it was hunting. The trail led up the ladder to someone everyone trusted, a judge with campaign slogans about law and order, the kind of man who thought his smile and his connections made him untouchable. We caught him at an abandoned mill, moonlight cutting through rust and shadows, and when he ordered me killed like it was nothing, I dropped flat and let the snipers do what they do best. In court, none of his power mattered. Evidence doesn't care who you think you are. The fallout was brutal and deserved. Life sentences, deals made, careers ended, reputations burned to ash. Months later, I got a letter from a mother thanking me for bringing her son home for answers for peace, and I sat there holding that paper thinking about how close it all came to going differently if I'd let fear decide my actions. Another case file waited on my desk, another town, another road, because this story isn't rare, it's just usually buried. And that's why I'm telling you this. Because power doesn't come from a badge or a title. It comes from integrity, and the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who think they'll never be challenged until they are. So tell me what you think. Did justice go far enough or not far enough? Was the line crossed, or was it finally drawn where it should have been all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue with each other. Share your own stories if you've got them, because silence is what lets this kind of thing survive, and conversation is how it finally dies.